Yo, bro, did you hear about that new discrimination case? Ah, man, I ain't hear about that, but you know what it is. Same thing as always. We gotta start our own businesses, you know what I mean? Get our own banks. Nah, bruh. Black people are the ones who are getting sued for discrimination. Oh?
Yeah, what up? It's your boy Rob, coming back at you once again with another video. So please watch this video all the way through to the end, and when you get to the end, if you are not subscribed, please hit subscribe and check out the next video. It's important for you to check out 2 of my videos in a row so you can get a feel of what the content is like. So let's get into this video. This is a odd case in Oregon. And the issue here is that there was some money set aside in a COVID-19 fund that was specifically for the Black residents of Oregon. And guess what? Some white people there and some Mexican people there just couldn't allow that to happen. So they decided to sue and tie the money up in court so that nobody can use it. Now, here's what's interesting. When it comes down to Oregon, Oregon has a long history of anti-Black racism, just like the rest of the United States. And there was actually a time when Black people had to freely surrender their businesses and move out because the state made that a law. But there is a conservative lawyer who is just adamant about making sure that whites get their racial justice in Oregon. So let's check this article out and see exactly what's going on here. All right. And I believe that this article is from the New York Times. All right. And it's called "A COVID-19 Fund Was Only for Black Residents. Then Came the Lawsuits." Now, you know those people out there in Oregon. Anytime anything is for Black people, other than a bullet in the head from the police or a low paycheck or welfare, they're gonna say that it's racist. Oh, I can't forget abortion. Can't forget that one. All right. So now here it says Oregon earmarked $62 million to explicitly benefit Black individuals and business owners. Now, some of the money is in limbo after lawsuits alleging racial discrimination. This is what I'm talking about. Black Lives Matter, they ain't around. That's why people need to come up with an organization called Black Wallets Matter. All right. So here it says Black civic leaders in Oregon heard the alarm bells early in the pandemic. Data and antidotes around the country suggested that the coronavirus was disproportionately killing Black people, just like the police. Literally, Black business owners had begun fretting about their livelihoods as stay-at-home orders and various other measures were put into place, and not to mention that the dominant society doesn't really like the control of having to wear masks. And I'm sure there's a little bit of laughter about the fact that Black people are dropping like flies from this. So that might have a little bit to do with that laxing on the masks, but that's just my own personal conspiracy theory. Many did not have valuable houses they could tap for capital, and requests for government assistance had gone nowhere. After convening several virtual meetings, the civic leaders proposed a bold and novel solution that state lawmakers approved in July. The state would earmark $62 million of its $1.4 billion in federal COVID-19 relief, money to provide grants to Black residents, business owners, and community organizations enduring pandemic-related hardships. And this is just a perfect example of the fact that there will never ever be allowed to have any. See, here in the United States, we're treated like we're the rest of society when it comes to money and things that would help us with our disproportionate, issues that we have. But anytime it's anything financial that could improve business ownership or improve, businesses, resources, then there's always someone, another minority or some group of the dominant society that has to come in and try to destroy it. Always. This always happens, and no one ever says anything about it. No one ever checks anybody about it. Black Lives Matter is around burning neighborhoods down all over the place, and they're not saying anything about this. news media. You know, this is just in the New York Times. You don't see Good Morning America saying anything about this. You don't see the local news stations saying anything about this. This is swept completely under the rug. And then people wonder why people are feeling the way that they feel. You know what I'm saying? This has been going on now for years, and people are tired of it. So, you know, there's some people out here who are really upset about the results of the election, and they're ready to have a civil war. There's a whole nother portion of the population who's tired of crap like this and is ready to have a civil war. You know what I'm saying? So now here it says it was finally being honest. This is who needs this support right now, said Lou Frederick, a state senator who is black. But now millions of dollars in grants are on hold after one Mexican American. So this is the brown and black coalition, the Mexican Americans suing black people because God forbid, you know, it's not enough that 11 million undocumented immigrants who were given are going to be fast tracked for citizenship. And it's not enough that Joe Biden literally said he's pretty much going to do whatever the Hispanic community asks. That's not enough. We can't even get money for the businesses that we have in our community. You know what I'm saying? But remember, this right here is nothing more than a revenge act of the United States allowing black people to actually even live in Oregon, because you remember it used to be illegal for black people to live in Oregon. And here is proof of that right here from the Washington Post. All right, now you can go check my playlist, which I advise everybody to do. If you go to the car and you're driving and you got a long way to go, put a playlist on, just listen to all that good information all the way straight through, and you will come to the video where I talked about this specifically. All right. And if anybody wants to, please just drop it in the comments, and I will definitely go through and do another video about this separately. All right. So here it says, and it comes in a year in which the pandemic has starkly exposed the socioeconomic and health disparities that African Americans face. It has unfolded too against the backdrop of the Black Lives Matter movement, which again, I don't even know why they're being mentioned, because they're absent when it comes to anything involving money or resources. With institutions across America, from corporations to city councils, acknowledging systemic racism, and activists demanding that meaningful steps be taken to undo racial inequalities. Politicians, social scientists, and jurists have long clashed over how far the government and institutions should go to repair the harm caused by racial discrimination, and the extent to which past racism should influence today's decisions. In creating the Oregon Cares Fund, lawmakers took the rare step of explicitly naming a single racial group as the beneficiary, arguing that black residents have been subjected to unique discrimination that put them at a disadvantage during the pandemic. Thank goodness the lawmakers were actually honest for once, but they were only honest because they knew that the lawyers would come and jam this money up and nothing would get put out anyway, and it could just sit in an account somewhere, in an escrow account, and collect interest. So they already knew this going forward, which is why they did it. And it's not rare for a single racial group to get a beneficiary, because again, we've talked about how the Chinese Americans got it for the internment camps, and Native Americans have gotten plenty of specifically earmarked money. And who else has? There's been a lot just within the Native American community alone. And also during the Obama administration, Jewish people, I believe they got either 12 or 16 million or billion, I can't remember, in Holocaust survivor funds. And those are all specific ethnic groups. So that's at least 3 occasions. And that's 3 occasions if you only take into consideration one of the times that the Native Americans got it. Because during the Obama administration, Native Americans got about 936 million, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So now here it says, in creating the Oregon Cares Fund, lawmakers took the rare step of explicitly naming a single racial group as the beneficiary, arguing that black residents have been subjected to unique discrimination that put them in the disadvantage during the pandemic. And they're being subjected to unique discrimination now because they're literally getting sued for discrimination after getting kicked out of the state. You know what I'm saying? After getting kicked out of the state in 1920. You know what I mean? Not that long ago, right? So now here it says, over the decades, various remedies to address discrimination have been met with legal challenges. Supreme Court rulings have established that race-based policies are constitutional only if they achieve a compelling governmental interest and are narrowly tailored to do so. The court has most notably allowed race to be used as a factor in college admissions to achieve student diversity, which that doesn't help anything. But the court in recent decades has also sided against one of the original rationales for affirmative action policies, to undo past discrimination and its lingering effect. And no racial minorities are the main beneficiary of affirmative action policies. White women who are not a minority are the main number one beneficiary of affirmative action. Yet, they're the ones who complain about it the most. You have to show that there is really a close nexus between why you are using race and the outcome you are seeking, said Melissa Murray, which is funny because, you know, when they decided to just ship us over in boatloads, they didn't do that. They used race to make sure that they got slaves who were durable, who could do free labor. But when it comes to this, then we have to make sure that there's a justifiable reason to do it, which, you know, what I just described is what causes a lot of what's going on today. But because, you know, the country doesn't really want to acknowledge that because it makes them not really look like the best place in the world, then we have to sweep it under the rug, you know. So now here it says, and I think here it's going to be a real question as to whether funding just black businesses through this CARES fund is actually the only way that you could address the problems that black Oregonians have experienced during this particular period. Well, blacks everywhere are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19. It's even in Joe Biden's plan for his presidency. So, but when it comes to black problems, we literally have everyone else telling us what our problem is. And then when someone actually tries to directly deal with the issue, then the others in the dominant society just can't allow that. They just can't allow that. Now, these are the same people who, you know, they tell you, why don't you get a job? And when someone has a business that's being disproportionately affected, as statistics have shown, same type of mathematics that creates the crime statistics, then they have a problem with solving a economic disparity, which is what government policies are supposed to do. You see how that works? So for anyone to try to sit there and tell me that systemic racism doesn't exist, anyone that wants to try to tell me that these are not the major attitudes throughout most of the United States, you have to prove a pretty convincing case, and you're not able to do it because this literally just happened. And if we had an actual fair United States, then there wouldn't even be a situation that would cause people to be disproportionately affected with anything. So just the fact that Oregon even had to have the notion of providing that $62 million tells you that there's a problem. Just the fact that COVID-19 affects black people the way that it does tells you that there's a problem, but you literally have 70% of the population who denies it. And maybe like about 45% of that population directly financially benefits from the things that put the people in the situation that they're in now. And it's just okay. It's just okay. So, yeah. In Oregon, the stakes are dire. Nearly $50 million worth of grants have been awarded, but a court has frozen $8.8 million, the remaining amount minus administration costs, until the litigation is resolved, and that process could take years. And while that process is taking years, these same people will be walking around without masks, coughing on everybody, laughing while you're dropping dead and your money is tied up in court. With Congress having recently extended the deadline to end this year for states to spend their CARES Act funds or return what remains to the federal government, some worry that lengthy litigation could mean the money is lost for good. Oregon's long history of anti-black racism has fueled much of the advocacy for the state's fund, and while other racial groups have said they supported it, critics have argued that black people are not the only ones who have faced discrimination in the state. Okay, so that means that everybody should get something to help them repair. That doesn't mean you just take away what black people got, because I'm pretty sure black people are the only ones who got kicked out of the state in the 1920s. And I'm sure if they hadn't got kicked out, those black people who are there now probably would have had longer standing businesses and had a chance to build up the resources that most of the existing businesses there have. Okay. Now, here it says some black residents who make up about 2% of the state's population said the argument was a distraction. It's absolutely a distraction. As a state, as a country, it is unusual for us to provide adequate resources to black people, said Kinjay Harmon Johnson, the president and chief executive of the Urban League of Portland, which I'd like to remind you that the Urban League is not a black organization. It's not a black representation in the federal government. It's just simply an organization that deals with urban issues. For some folks, it's shocking and distasteful. But Edward Blum, a white conservative activist whose organization, Project on Fair Representation, is underwriting one of 2 lawsuits challenging the fund, said that the opposition was about preventing racial exclusion. God forbid. Mr. Blum, do me a favor, all right? Prevent some bullets from going in black dudes' heads from the police. Prevent some knees on necks, all right? Let's do that, since you care so much, all right? Because you don't care, I'm saying. It is like in the employment arena, going to apply for a job and seeing a sign on the employment office that reads, "No Asians need apply," said Mr. Blum. Actually, it's not like that at all. And Mr. Blum, as a matter of fact, the group of people who you are actually suing literally had that sign up in Oregon. They literally had that sign up. As a attorney, as a lawyer, you should know the state's legislations, codes, and statutes, and know that. But see, you're a racist, sir, and you just want to whine because you want to preserve your dominance. You don't care. This whole entire thing is a dog whistle. This is why I tell everybody, you have no friends. You have zero representation, all right? Who has led efforts to challenge race-based admissions policies at universities, including high-profile cases against Harvard. Your race and your ethnicity should not be used to help you or harm you in life's endeavors. Now, this same guy who says this is against reparations, and that's literally why we have the situation that we have, because of slavery. Like you can't make this up, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got white people using racism to call other people racist. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's 2021. That is the year that we live in. See, if black people had it together the way it should be together, there should be an unspoken coalition of attorneys who are ready to drop what they need to drop and send their firm's best partners to the Supreme Court and smash this shit. But we too busy just doing dumb shit. So you get shit like this, and then everybody just sits around and drool comes out. You know what I mean? So now, anyway, here it goes. Walter Leha, a plaintiff on one of the lawsuits, said he might be on the verge of laying off employees from Dynamic Service Fire and Security, the small electrical services company he started in Salem in 2007, if he did not receive relief money soon. An earlier loan of about $20,000 from the federal Paycheck Protection Program, he said, was just enough to cover payroll for about 2 months. Mr. Leha, who is 64 and white, said he could not say whether historic discrimination put black owners at a disadvantage. Let me see. Let me help you out here, Mr. Leha. All you had to do is just Google when black people were kicked out of Oregon, and it'll tell you all about how black people had to give up their businesses. It'll tell you how they got publicly spanked if they were late leaving. It's all right here. But you can't say anything about it. And this, This actually happened in the 1920s, so your parents were probably alive. They could probably tell you all about it. They probably benefited from it. You know what I mean? But a particular fund, he said, was not warranted. Oh, well, I mean, there you go. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It's discriminatory, he says. It's locking up a bunch of funds that can only be used by black businesses when there's a ton of businesses out there that need access to those funds. What about when black people were like specifically kicked out and everybody just got a bunch of free shit that black people left behind, like their businesses? Let me stop. It's not a white or a black thing. It's an everybody thing. Dog whistle. Dog whistle. Where's Cori Bush at? Oh, that's right. She's worried about the climate. Well, why don't you go to Portland and go to Oregon and deal with the anti-black climate before you worry about the stupid Green New Deal? How about that? You know what I'm saying? Now, here it says that lawsuit, a class action case led by Mr. Leha and the white owner of a logging company, Great Northern Resources, based in the city of John Day, is one of two that challenges the fund. The other, underwritten by the Center of Individual Rights, a nonprofit law firm for advocating for limited government, involves a Mexican-American owner of the Revolution Coffee House in Portland who has claimed discrimination. Of course, there's the there's the Black and Brown Coalition. The Black and Brown Coalition, let me tell you something, that's an actual myth. Even when it comes to prison gangs, Mexican gangs don't even coincide with black gangs. They actually deal with white nationalists and Aryan gangs when it comes to the prisons and when it comes to the streets. So when dealing with Mexicans, there's no Black and Brown Coalition. That's a complete lie. If you listen to George Lopez's comedy special, he even jokes about how racist Mexicans are towards black people. Let's not get it twisted. You know what I'm saying? So now here it says, many of today's economic and health disparities stem from past policies and practice that were explicitly racist. You mean like kicking out black people? Like that? You know what I'm saying? And then if you say something about this, you're the racist. You know what I mean? You're angry. No, I'm not angry. I didn't kick anybody out of the state. So anyway, here it says, some social scientists say arguing that measures aimed at particular races were necessary to undo the damage. Duh, you think? I mean, there was no white people kicked out. This was an all-white state. Ask somebody how you doing. I'm all white. You know what I mean? Like, so here it says, but courts have set a high bar for allowing the clear use of race in legislation. To get around the legal hurdles, policymakers tend to rely on proxies for race, like zip codes and socioeconomic statuses. Well, those are also liberal dog whistles for you're not getting anything. Latinos and LGBTQ are getting everything. That's what those are dog whistles for. When designing measures they hope will benefit marginalized racial groups. But Akasha Lawrence Spence, a state representative, said subtle measures were not enough for the current crisis. Specifically targeting black Oregonians was a relief or an important step in forcing people to grasp the effects of racism. Oh yeah, they grasped the effects of racism, all right. This fund says that we understand that for no other reason than the color of your skin, you have been restricted and prohibited from accessing the tools to economically mobilize. Hello? Can we say the last 400 years? Like, are you serious? And if you don't want to say slavery, because we always get the, well, how does slavery affect anybody today? Nobody ever asked about how slavery is affecting the people that are still making money off of it. But I did very in-depth videos about Aunt Jemima and how, and Uncle Ben, and how they're still making money off of slavery and characters and Maestro and Mammy images today. And how the family of Nancy Green, who's the actual Aunt Jemima, isn't getting paid a damn dime. All right. And again, I mean, I don't really understand why I have to bring this up so many times and why the attorneys in Oregon can't find this. But if you pay $4.99, which is probably about 5 minutes of attorney work, you can buy a subscription to the Washington Post and it will unlock this article for you. Okay, and then you can read all about how there was an all-white state, all right, okay, for a very long time, and how black people had to give up their businesses and their homes and their property, and everybody there got it for free. And guess what? That was based on the color of people's skin. So in order to fix it, then you have to fix it based on the color of people's skin. Stop crying about it. That's the fragility that people get so outraged about, that people are actually talking about. You know what I mean? So for that reason, we're not going to create any veiled language, as the black community are tired of that. Absolutely. Supporters of the fund argue that the $62 million accounted for about 4.5% of what the state received, leaving plenty for residents who are not black. I mean, yeah, like 4.5%. So that means that you have 95.5% left. They also noted that other COVID-19 related funds were tailored in a way that allowed them to almost exclusively benefit particular racial or ethnic groups. A $10 million fund created by the state that largely benefits undocumented, there you go, undocumented Latino immigrants, and one created by Portland officials to aid a district of largely Asian-owned businesses. There you go. So you notice how the white conservative lawyer is not suing the undocumented Latino immigrant fund. And the thing is that he's actually suing these people, these black people, and these people are actually Americans. They're actually citizens. So that's just proof of the double talk. And when it comes to immigration, that shows you where you stand. Okay. So again, my points are validated. Okay. I would like to see the lawsuits against the undocumented Latinos who are getting this $10 million. How do you even allocate money to people who have no documentation when you're supposed to have a tax ID to get this kind of money? But they're not being sued. The actual American citizens who are black are being sued. And it's just okay. You know, this is just, hey, like Snoop Dogg says, this is the kind of shit that happens every day. You know what I mean? Designing measures in that way to target black residents would be difficult and fail to have a significant impact, they said. Oregon's history of racism predates its statehood. As a territory in 1844, it passed a law banning African Americans from settling there. See, we're not making this shit up. This is what the United States is, ladies and gentlemen. And then when you try to get it repaired, it's we didn't do anything. You're the one that's racist because you want something because of the color of your skin. That's because a whole bunch of shit happened because of the color of our skin. The state's black population ballooned in the 1940s as many Southerners migrated west for jobs in the wartime industries. Like in many other parts of the country, the new black settlers in Oregon were restricted to certain areas. Imagine that. In 1990, 80% of the state's black population was confined to 2 zip codes in Northeast Portland, according to Stephen Green, a Portland native and former banker. All right, and I don't know why they got George Floyd up here. This is they do this to just like mess up everything. George Floyd don't have nothing to do with this. This is a financial issue. This don't have nothing to do with the police. You know what I'm saying? Despite the fact that, you know, despite the fact that all lives matter, but all wallets apparently don't. Banks and other investors largely avoided doing business in those communities. Well, of course they did. They avoid doing business with us now. Know what I mean? Residents were also displaced when parts of those neighborhoods were raised at different times to build a highway, a sports arena, and a hospital. Government projects always go through black areas to purposely cause destabilization and to make them have to uproot themselves from permanent real estate that they were investing in. That is always the purpose when there is a city project, all right? That history robbed many African Americans of opportunities to build wealth, historians say, a legacy that continues. And, you know, not to mention the fact that, you know, it was just legal to have discriminatory laws all over the place. The racial wealth gap in Monmouth County which includes Portland, is larger now than it was 40 years ago. Well, imagine that. The entire nationwide wealth gap is huge, with black residents holding fewer assets than other racial groups. Well, it's always like that. And if it's not like that, it's against the United States public policy. And if anybody wants to debate that with me, then ask that lawyer why, as soon as black people got any kind of endowment from the government, did he have to jump up and sue? He sued the government before he sued them for giving money to undocumented immigrants. I mean, somebody justify that to me, please. I'm here. Hit the about page. You know what I'm saying? So now here it says in 2019, black Oregonians received 4 of the 984 loans that the Small Business Administration issued statewide, according to the Portland Business Journal. Without traditional banking relationships, black business owners often have had to reach into their own pockets or seek other avenues to finance startup costs, civic leaders said. That left many unable to get pandemic relief loans offered by the federal government because the loans required going through lending institutions. Early in the pandemic, various indicators appeared to show that black businesses were suffering more severely than others. A Stanford University found that the number of black business owners nationwide dropped by 41% from February to April, compared with a 32% decrease for Latinos, 26% for Asians, and 17% for white owners. Lawyers defending the Oregon CARES Fund have argued that the state has a duty to ensure the distribution of COVID-19 relief funds does not perpetuate the disparities of black residents face. That means targeting black residents for relief because other efforts to address inequality have failed, said Janelle Byam, a state representative who is black. Wow. Without that intentionally, without them actually caring that the money flows through our communities, they'll never have to do anything that changes the status quo, she said. I'm not okay with that. I don't think anybody other than Candace Owens and possibly Kanye West are okay with that. And there's a whole actually group of black people nowadays who, actually believe these talking points and also, have created businesses off of destroying other black people, but that's another story for another day. All right. So now, anyway, here it says, but some legal scholars and a lawyer for the state legislature said the fund could not violate the 14th Amendment's equal protection guarantees. Wow. Clark D. Cunningham, a law professor at Georgia State University, was dubious of the 14th Amendment claims. About a month after the amendment passed in Congress in 1866, those same politicians reauthorized the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency meant to primarily help formerly enslaved African Americans, he said, because just, everybody in the United States was enslaved. You know what's crazy? If you talk to a lot of people, they literally actually think that. The idea that in this case, a lumber company could use the 14th Amendment as a weapon to prevent the descendants of slaves from receiving an economic benefit in a time of disaster is utterly inconsistent with the historical context, Mr. Cunningham said. Again, they hate talking about slavery because it's just so shameful and disgusting. So if you don't talk about slavery and you just go back as far as 1920, that shit happened. Anytime any of this is discussed, it's always, slavery was back then. Okay, well, what about the shit that happened 80 years ago? You know what I mean? What about that? What about the fact that this state literally had a law that said black people, you have to get up and leave and everybody gets your shit for free? Okay. So here, this is the guy. This guy right here is the struggling white male that is standing up for the disenfranchised white race that needs so much representation in this time of hardship where their wealth gap is positive and everyone else is negative. You know what I'm saying? This is the guy for justice right here. You know what I'm saying? This is the guy that is gonna fight, the good fight and make things right. Man, sit your $5 ass down. Unbelievable. In Portland, Joy Mack said the pandemic rekindled the stress she felt when she opened the Jaya Rose Salon in 2008. She and her husband, an engineer, are both black and solidly middle class. But after visiting more than 10 lending institutions to try to get startup funding, she received only 2 loans, she said. One of the lenders kept asking for more financial information, so eventually they walked away from the relationship. And that's what you call colorblind coded racism. Because you have to understand that the entire system is created to not allow you to build wealth, because the rest of the economy is built on building wealth off of you. So when they see people getting out of their place, then they have to push you back down. That's what this lawyer is doing. That's what these lending institutions do. That's what the social media algorithms do. That's just what it is. That is one of the reasons why I say the only solution is to separate from all of this. Create your own microeconomic block and just move that entire block like a wrecking ball. But we got too many people who hate themselves. We got too many people who can't settle differences if there's 1 or 2 differences. So you just continue to see stuff like this happen and complain about it instead of actually doing something. You know what I mean? So now here it says, I'm trying to keep her hair salon afloat amid the pandemic, Miss Mack, 45, said as she applied for a forgivable federal government loan, but was, of course, turned down because she had about $5,000 in tax debt. She got a $5,000 grant from the city and a $10,000 disaster loan from the federal government. She also had to take out lines of credit. Miss Mack eventually received a grant from the Oregon Care Fund. Although she would not say how much she received, she said it saved her from having to close down under the weight of tens of thousands of dollars of debt. Honestly, she said, that is what just helped us get over that COVID hump. And there is a very diligently working white lawyer out there who is working to stop the suppression of the white race so that you don't take away any money from them. Because if you get a loan, then I guess, the white economy will fall like a stack of dominoes, according to Mr. Blum. All right? I don't know how he came up with that conclusion. I don't know how any of that makes sense. Actually, I know exactly how it makes sense, but we're not allowed to talk about it because it's pseudoscience, according to everybody else, despite, everybody else except for the people that it actually affects, And again, this isn't a Disney story. This doesn't say Walt Disney up here. It doesn't say Dr. Seuss up here. It doesn't say Lucasfilms up here. It says the Washington Post, which means that it's actually real. It doesn't say Marvel. It doesn't say DC. It doesn't say Hasbro. It doesn't say Warner Brothers. It doesn't say Hollywood. It says the Washington Post. This shit actually happened. You know what I mean? Now, I don't know, man. There's not a lot of people that have been in the United States as a racial group that have actually been kicked out of a state. They actually did that to black people. And I don't really hear any black people talking about a civil war. You know what I mean? I don't know. But a lot of people really want to have a civil war in the country because they feel that the country is not going the way that they want it to go. And honestly, if you ask me, not all, but a lot, not all, but a lot of those people who feel that way, part of the reason they want a civil war is because $62 million going directly to black people is the icing on the cake. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. When you see black people getting money from the government, or when there's any acknowledgement of slavery, then that means that shit's hitting the fan and America's just going to hell in a handbasket and it's time to take it back. So that's where we're at. All right. So with that being said, if you've made it here, then you finished the video. Please make sure that you check out the next video or either save the playlist that will appear at the end of this video, and make sure you put it on next time you go in your car and check out some of this good information so that you know exactly what's going on and so that you know exactly why things happen that happen. All right. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you hit that subscription link right there. All right. And I will catch you in the next video.
Crazy, right? You said something? I missed it.
Peace.